and welcome to Bright Blue Innovation. My name is Lidia Paulinska and I will be your host for today's show. The theme of our show for this week is Convergence of Business and Technology with advances and accessibility of computers and software in business and in research. What used to be separate industry, now they are sharing and blending common information, common techniques for everything for solving problems. To highlight this trend, we will be hearing from Tessera Corporation about their technology side. They have been an electronic product supplier and manufacturing partner and have now expanded to include intellectual property, software, and advanced licensing technologies. The CTO will be speaking about his experience in software, electronics, and biotechnology, how they are sharing and underlining core. Continuing that theme, we have Pharmatech Associates, which come from the business side of dealing with biotechnology. Now, these two worlds are converging with central core, all based on data collection and analysis on the computer. And I would like to introduce my first guest, Steve Teig. Steve Teig is Chief Technology Officer at Tessera Corporation since 2015. Before that, he has been CTO of 3 software companies, 2 biotech companies, and 1 semiconductor company. Steve received a World Technology Award and an Edison Award in 2011. He's an inventor of over 300 U.S. patents across multiple disciplines, surpassing even Thomas Edison. Steve, welcome to our show. Steve, as an avid inventor, why do you believe it's so important to work in multiple disciplines and have patents in different areas, rather just pick up one area and work on that?
Well, 2 reasons. First of all, I think there are many, many interesting areas, and it's fun to touch a number of those. But the second is I realized early that to some extent engineering is engineering, and the same engineering ideas really apply whether you're doing engineering of software, engineering of a bridge, engineering of a molecule or a chip. And I love the idea of being able to apply the same engineering approach to a wide variety of problems to affect customers in different industries.
I see. So what I really would like to know is, what is your philosophy of being an inventor? What brings a flash of inspiration for you? What that means for you?
For me, it's about starting with a problem that actually matters to people. It's so easy to come up with new ideas, but that are sterile, that don't apply to problems that matter. To me, I try to look at problems for real people that I don't think are being solved well, problems where if they were solved would matter, would affect people's lives, and then work on, okay, if I really had to solve that problem, what would I do? And for some of those problems, I've been able to come up with something.
So why did you choose to patent your invention versus open them to the world?
Principally because I've worked for almost my entire career in startup companies, and it offered a degree of protection within those startup companies, given the giant behemoths that are out there, that it offered a degree of protection, both to convince the financiers to finance us that we had that protection, but also with the intention of future defense. It was really, I wanted to lead with product, but to have the patents just in case some big company went after us.
So you work in the electronic industry, software industry, and the biotech industry. What is an underlying thread that allowed you to step into all these 3 spaces?
It's really that, again, I think that the precepts that underlie engineering are common to engineering, whether it's molecules or software or bridges or semiconductors, that the same ideas of finding good representation for the problem, having a good means of doing simulation, having a good way of doing optimization, having a good way of doing machine learning. Each of these ideas applies to each of these engineering areas. And ultimately, the same math and the same computer science sort of underlies all of them. And to some extent, I've used that observation as a magic trick to let me switch industries. I mean, I think people found it surprising when I switched from chip design to BioTech. But the truth is, I applied chip design philosophy, chip design ideas, in many ways even chip design algorithmic ideas within drug discovery, and I was lucky enough to be the first to do that because how many people who work on drug discovery know about chip design? So I was able to take a body of engineering technology and cheat by being able to use technologies people hadn't previously applied, even though it's all engineering.
In that same focus, Tessera is now making a presence in IoT. IoT is currently a buzzword for everything that is out there. Is there any fundamental change in IoT at the lower level to allow it to be applicable?
For me, IoT, as people talk about it, kind of misses the point. And the idea that everything should have a web address. Well, why should everything have a web address? Why should my toaster have a web address? I think what people actually want is that objects understand their environments, that you can interact with the objects you interact with where they have some level of intelligence. They recognize me, they recognize what's going on around them. Making those objects smart, the objects in the environment smart, to me that's the key idea. And I don't see that as the same thing as IoT. Of course, many of those devices will want to talk to the internet, that's a good thing. But I don't think it's about the internet. I think IoT isn't the interesting thrust. I think making objects smart is the interesting thrust, and that's certainly one of the agendas we're pursuing at Tessera, and that I'm interested in pursuing personally.
So, is making objects smart different from that what was called embedded devices for the last 20 years?
In my opinion, yes. And the key issue is having objects that are aware of their environments, that can infer concepts, infer information based on their environment, and can act based on that information. So it's not enough to be in the environment, it's not enough to have processing. The idea is to act as a biological organism might, to act in the context of where you physically find yourself.
So the devices can be aware and respond from its situation rather than just follow and plan program.
And as a function of what's going on around it. I mean, one of the differences between a smart object and, say, a data center is the modern manifestation of a computer that might have existed in the 1950s, where you have a bunch of computing in a box somewhere, hidden off in some hidden remote location. And that's clearly valuable. I don't mean to dismiss that at all. But by being deaf and dumb and blind and just being a computing entity, it's very limited in how it can interact in the environment. It's very different from a biological organism. What I want to do is to be able to produce devices that bring that intelligence out into the real world, where it can understand, oh look, the sun is out, oh look, you're walking by, oh look, you know, and be able to act in accordance with what's physically going on in the physical environment, and to be part of that environment the way biological organisms are, rather than the way historical computers are in a box hidden off somewhere.
So the last question, with those inventions and with the commonality going through them, do devices bring any special privacy and security issues as data is collected and now making decisions on their own by being aware of their context that we can't or weren't planning to apply to the things and inform others?
Well, I am very sensitive to the issues of privacy and security, and it's one of the many reasons that I'm as passionate as I am about smart objects. If we send all of the raw data in our environment off to data centers over which we have no control, to me, that's both a tremendous potential violation of privacy and a tremendous security risk for a malicious actor to be able to make use of that. The more of the computation that can be done locally, where it's only information where you really need the data center for looking up stuff on the web and so on, only then do you send stuff upstream. That everything else can be done locally, I think, is an opportunity to preserve a notion of privacy, to reduce the threat from security from bad actors, while still making use of the powerful technology.
Thank you very much, Steve.
Thank you.
Tom Lacey is a CEO of Tessera Corporation. Tom, you hold multiple executive-level positions with the companies. In 2013, you joined Tessera. What attracted you to this company?
Initially, first of all, thank you for having me, and thank you for having Steve. And before I answer your question on how I ended up at Tessera, I wanted to address one of the questions you asked Steve specifically was, Steve, how did you go from biosciences to chip design to a number of different disciplines? And Steve, I've been in the industry more than 30 years and is hands down one of the top few smartest people I've ever met. So he was being humble. Part of it, he's an incredibly bright guy. With respect to how did I end up at Tessera, initially I was asked to join the board of directors. And from there, after a short period of time on the board, I was asked to be an interim CEO. And I decided, after learning more about the company, to be the interim CEO. And an interim CEO title was removed in about 6 months, and I became the full-time or regular CEO, if you will, back in the end of 2013.
So why did you choose to run the company rather than work for the company?
Again, I was on the board of directors, and you're right, I would have been working for the shareholders at that time. And initially, candidly, knowing what I knew about the company, I didn't know a great deal about it. I wasn't too keen on being the CEO. I was worried about the past behavior of the company, in some cases the brand of the company. And as I got in and learned more about the company, the technology, the people, the potential opportunity for the company, I got tremendously excited. And I went from being a board member, if you will, only a board member, to being very excited to being the interim CEO. And as the interim CEO, one of the things the company was doing was looking for potential full-time replacement. And further I got into it, the more interested I became in being that full-time replacement. And I have been for the last 3.5 years, and it's been terrific. Just wonderful customers, wonderful technology, wonderful people, and it's really been great.
So if everything is going to become smart object, how that affect us? It is going to enhance people's life or going to be intrusive? I know that you are a giant fan, so can you tell me example what does this gathering of data can do for the sport fans?
I hope that they can do up with the Giants this year is get them some bullpen help. They really need it. We probably have too much data on sports already, so I don't know if that's going to be a good thing. People are like me; they probably spend too much time on it. It's a nice escape. With respect to objects being smart, yeah, we absolutely believe that that's the future. You're going to see these smart sensor devices, and we have a number of unique technologies, as Steve outlined, that really contribute to that. So we're quite excited about that business opportunity for our customers, for our partners, and ultimately for our shareholders. With respect to, do we believe there's going to be privacy issues? I don't think any more with this kind of a technology than exists today, and in some respects less, because the smart objects everywhere aren't all necessarily connected to the internet. They can be local devices making local decisions, and in fact that data won't be shared, whether it's on backroom data server at Google or Facebook or somebody else. It won't be available. So depending upon what's implemented, there's an argument to be made it'll be more secure than what some of today's devices do.
Thank you very much, Steve and Tom, for telling us about the path of innovation and about the diversity of Tessera and how the smart objects are moving to all new areas. Our next guest is from biotechnology field, where traditional business and their scientific methods are now moving ahead and adopting new technology. For over 2 decades, Pharmatech Associates has been providing consulting and advisory services to the regulated life science industry. Please welcome Bikash Chatterjee, President and Chief Science Officer of Pharmatech Associates. Thank you for coming to our show.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Can you tell us more about the Pharmatech and your service offering?
Oh, sure. Thank you very much, Lidia. So as you mentioned, Pharmatech has been around for over 2 decades, always in the Bay Area. We do handle projects all over the world. And the way we do that is we're an end-to-end and top-to-bottom consultancy. And what I mean by that is that fundamentally we get involved with companies at the early stages, molecule identification, product design, really at the ideation component of it. And we shepherd them all the way through to commercial introduction. And in many of the sectors like medical device and some of these novel clinical drug delivery solutions, we actually handle the post-commercial pharmacovigilance component of that, meaning that we can utilize systems to see how the product's actually performing in their target audience. The company consists really of sort of 4 core competencies. We call them spheres. The company was founded as a validation company, so equipment, processes, facilities, analytical equipment, these are the things that fall into that sphere. Then we added a little over a decade ago a regulatory affairs group where we work with the FDA and EMA and other regulatory bodies around the world. A regulatory compliance group that's headed up by Richard Aleman, former FDA compliance officer ran the Denver office for almost 28 years. And here we handle the quality pieces associated with product development. And then we have a product and process development component where we really help folks go from that innovation and development phase to the sort of the execution and commercial phase. So we're very fortunate in that we get involved at both the strategic level and the tactical level when it comes to sort of these product designs, developments, and deployments. And it's one of the unique things that makes Pharmatech sort of an unusual consultancy. Everything that we do today is so much driven by the ability to integrate and look ahead, particularly as we talk about the integration of technology. And our ability to sort of foster that has really been one of our core strengths.
So it seems like technology and medicine have always been closely aligned, and in terms of advancing healthcare.
Yeah.
And what are you seeing today in terms of technology's role in furthering the life science industry?
Sure. Well, we're seeing an awful lot. It's never been more exciting than the last 5 to 7 years. The industry's gone through a lot of consolidation with the emergence of the emerging markets, China, India, Korea, etc. These are now world players. These are folks that are providing healthcare solutions to the marketplace. And it really forced the U.S. and Europe to sort of circle their wagons and find another way to be more efficient, more innovative, etc., to be competitive. So overall, it's been a very good thing. And we're seeing some really tangible, significant innovations today that are sort of, we predict, are going to change sort of the landscape of healthcare going forward. Internet of Things, of course, is a key element. The age of sensors, more and more and more. The fact that the patient, the delta between the patient's compliance with the drug and the physician's or the caregiver's ability to see that compliance is something that everyone wants in terms of furthering healthcare. So smart pills using MEMS technology, intelligent medical devices that have some sort of a reporting capability. These are more and more becoming sort of objectives for new and innovative designs. Of course, moving along with that, you have the creation of combination products. Combination products have been around for a long time. It happens to be one of the areas we're very, very facile with. This is the thought that we take an innovative drug, we package it with some sort of an innovative medical device, and together we not only perhaps improve the availability and efficacy of the drug, we perhaps expand the target audience. So if I'm a company that's got a drug nearing the end of its patent useful life, preparing for generic competition, by marrying that with a medical device, I could potentially extend that significantly and open up a new marketplace. So really interested in terms of the biotech and pharma space to be able to do that. But for patients, this means you have better compliance. You have better potential drug delivery and efficacy. For caregivers, it means I have potentially exquisite visibility into how the patient is actually taking the drug. So they're supposed to take it 3 times a day. Are they really taking it 3 times a day? And there's no lying when it comes to these elements out there. The other thing that we're seeing, it's unbelievably exciting. I think the next 5 years are going to look very different than anything we've ever seen before, is the concept of next generation gene sequencing, right? So imagine you can look at an individual's gene sequence right down to the DNA level, within the DNA right down to the somatic level, and you have a particular disease state. Let's say you have cancer, a particular type of cancer. They can actually look at your genetic makeup and see what the particular drivers are that's causing that cancer. And so now imagine with next generation gene sequencing, focusing on a particular cancer state, you have the potential to target the drug therapy for that particular cancer state. So if you're a cancer patient today, pretty much you're going to go through radiology, you're going to go through chemotherapy. These are really challenging sort of broad spectrum solutions as you look at sort of the combination of how we try and reduce the probability of the cancer propagating or coming back. But with something like next generation gene sequencing, you can partner that with the promise of something like personalized medicine. So personalized medicine is really the potential to create a unique drug cocktail that's just for you.
So the the medicine, the drugs will be no more in the just like shelf in the pharmacy. They will be different, right?
Potentially, yeah. You've got this
So business model has to change.
has to change. A regulatory model and the challenges for the industry has to change. Of course, the sophistication of being able to do this is significant. So from a competitive perspective, you're not going to find a lot of marketplaces that are going to immediately jump on this bandwagon, because you need to have a pretty strong skill set. And this is also an area where the regulatory authorities are sort of figuring it out. In conventional pharma and biotech, the largest commitment that pharma makes and biotech makes is that we're going to prove to you we can consistently make these drugs. That means you have to do it multiple times, and we have to measure and prove that we've done it consistently. Well, if I just make one drug for you, how do I prove I can do that safely and consistently?
Oh, absolutely. You convinced me.
Very, very challenging.
And it is possible now to find the genes, or it's depend what kind of cancer they
No, it's absolutely possible now. And so there are several large manufacturers out there. Illumina is one, Thermo Fisher is another. There's a whole handful of others that are actively developing programs for actually this gene sequencing with the intent of identifying the actual genetic indicator that drives that particular cancer. And then there may be multiple genetic indicators that do that, and they do that for every individual. So they call that companion diagnostics, and really it's going to change oncology therapy and other therapies in the future quite significantly. Now marry that with wearable medical devices.
Yes, exactly.
You really have almost the entire cadre in terms of information transfer, etc. The other thing you see with Internet of Things out there is it's a sort of a different application. It's not just in the healthcare space. You're seeing it in the manufacturing spaces and the clinical spaces there. The ability to gather sort of real-time data seamlessly so that we can more rapidly understand what's happening in the process, and then hopefully potentially make improvements, adjustments, etc., without having an impact on my bottom line in the business, which is very attractive to a lot of folks as well.
It's actually a wonderful thing that we can, as a patient, or we can, like, humans, we can just track our using variables. We can track and have influence on our health.
Yeah, absolutely right.
Not just like don't smoke, don't something,
Right.
but you can actively do something about that.
That's right.
So, with this new level of synergy between technology and drugs therapy, what are some of the hurdles that are emerging?
Well, of course, when you've got the ability to gather data, controlling and protecting that data is probably the largest issue we've got out there. One of the requirements that the industry is trying to deal with right now is HR 3204, which went into effect about 2 years ago. 3 years ago. And the intent there is to create a universal serialization track and trace solution that goes across all states. It used to be every state had their own law, which is kind of crazy. So now we have this one uniform law, but the law states that by 2017, November 27th, 2017, all drug manufacturers have got to have this track and trace technology in place. That means it's a very complicated solution. If you imagine, if I'm making the drug myself, that's easier, right? I've got my own factory, I've got my own people, I've got my own IT. That's easier. But today, because of capital considerations, etc., most people use an outsourcing strategy. So I'm going to use a contract manufacturer or a contract service provider to do manufacturing. But they are accountable to me for that track, trace, and traceability of it, and that communication of that. There's reports that have to go to the FDA. It's a very difficult thing to sort of negotiate. They have multiple legacy partners. They have new partners. How do I do something today for you, as my new client, that doesn't undermine what I've been doing for my long-term client? It's not a trivial question to try and answer. And this is where we get involved quite often, trying to develop architectures and solutions that are going to work across the business model. The other big thing, HIPAA, of course. HIPAA has been a big deal since 2016. It's been law, and folks have had to comply. Telemedicine, mobile computing. I will tell you, mobile clinical data application has transformed virtual biotech. So when you used to do a clinical study, it might cost you $5,000 or $10,000 a patient. But because you can use these mobile applications now, you can drop that cost to like $1,500 a patient. So if I'm a young startup in a Series A funded scenario, this is a game changer for us. But understanding the rules and regulations around utilizing those solutions are tricky around that. And so there are a lot of folks that have new and innovative solutions, but if you're not considering the HIPAA component, that's a big deal. You'll get in trouble. The other big thing that's looming is the General Data Protection Regulation that's going into place in 2018.
Yes.
And that tends to create sort of sweeping, broad legislation across all market sectors, all companies that are global companies that intend to do work in Europe. And there's several key elements that go with that that are really things that they're going to have to consider if you're going to want to do drug development and sales in Europe. First of all, they are going to mandate that every company needs to have a data protection officer. I don't think I know of a single pharma company or biotech company that has a data protection officer. There are probably some out there, but it's not widespread. That's going to kind of change the whole game in terms of focus and emphasis in the business model. They're going to require mandatory privacy assessments associated with your overall data flow. So you have to put these risk assessments in place and show you've got reasonable countermeasures in order to prove that you're compliant. One of the most interesting things for me is the fact that every patient in Europe, every person in Europe has the right to be forgotten. So they can say, you can gather my data, but I decide I don't want you to gather my data. You have to prove to me that you've forgotten me. Interesting. It's not something that we think about. We're talking about process and IT architecture. And then they've broadened the definition of personal data. It's no longer just the information you provide through a portal there or a form that you fill out. They're including social media and cultural elements and economic drivers there in their definition of personal data. So if I'm a pharmaceutical or biotech company attempting to do business or a medical device company in Europe, I have to really think outside the box because these are challenges I've never had to deal with in the past. So information, privacy, and cybersecurity, which are sort of also brands, are going to come to the forefront. If we're going to be competitive and be able to compete in the global market, certainly Europe. And the U.S. is not far behind. The U.S. CERT is in place. There's a lot of emphasis on this. They're working with the largest companies out there to try and develop sort of industry solutions to these regulations, and we're working on that, but it's not a huge focus. And so, but as ransomware increases, and we get more and more hacks of these hospitals and healthcare and research institutions, you're going to see a greater emphasis on that. So I think it's an area that's going to influence a lot of what we do in terms of product development and expansion.
Bikash, the final thoughts regarding the future of the industry.
Well, it's going to look completely different 10 years from now. I can tell that right now. Medical devices, wearable medical devices and IoT are going to provide us unparalleled insight in terms of healthcare, how we're going to treat the effectiveness of healthcare, the long-term consequences of that. With that goes the burden of control, right? And as an industry, we've always been a little bit behind the rest of the world and the rest of the other industries when it comes to that. And I think we're not going to be allowed that luxury anymore.
Thank you very much.